Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're the place where we sift through, piles of complex source material, try to make sense of it, and really give you the key knowledge you need. And today, we are definitely diving deep. We're immersing ourselves in the story of Aileen Wuornos. It's uniquely disturbing.
It really is. Wuornos, born Kitman in 1956, executed in 2002. She holds this really specific place in, let's say, criminal history, very widely recognized.
Probably one of the most recognized female serial killers.
Absolutely, and certainly one of the most sensationalized, in the American consciousness. But that whole media storm, it often just completely overshadows the real complexity of her case.
And that's exactly why we're doing this deep dive. Our goal here is to try and get past those headlines, the easy monster narrative.
Right.
We've gathered a whole range of sources, biographical stuff, criminal records, psychological reports, and we're synthesizing it all to try and trace that devastating path that led her to death row. Convicted for 6 counts of first-degree murder.
And the crimes themselves, they happened in this really concentrated burst of violence. Brutal, fast. Her confirmed killing spree lasted exactly 1 year.
Just 12 months.
12 months. November 1989 to November 1990. In that time, she killed and robbed 7 men. All clients, motorists she met working the highways in Florida, and always with the same weapon.
The .22 revolver.
A high-standard .22 revolver, yeah.
7 victims.
Yeah.
1 year.
Yeah.
And just a lifetime of trauma. Really extreme trauma leading up to it. I think to really get any kind of understanding, we absolutely have to start right at the beginning. Her early life.
Yeah, you have to.
Let's get into that foundation of trauma.
Well, the instability, the chaos around Aileen's life, it started even before she was born. February 29th, 1956, in Michigan.
A leap year baby.
Yeah. Her mother, Diane Wuornos, was only 16, just 16. And she'd already filed for divorce from Aileen's father, Leo Pittman, 2 months before Aileen was even born.
Wow.
The whole marriage lasted less than 2 years. And Leo Pittman, he was just gone. Vanished right away.
And the picture the sources paint of this father she never met, it's frankly terrifying.
It is. Leo Pittman was diagnosed schizophrenic. Later, he was sentenced to life, kidnapping and raping a 7-year-old girl.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. And he eventually committed suicide in prison, hanged himself in 1969. So Aileen's earliest context is abandonment, plus this genetic link to severe mental illness and predatory violence.
A complete void, really, which, as you said, just got filled with more chaos.
Immediately, the family structure just completely collapsed. In January 1960, Diane, the mother, just abandoned Aileen and her older brother, Keith.
How old was Aileen then?
She was just shy of 4 years old.
Unbelievable.
They were then legally adopted by their maternal grandparents, Lori and Britta Wuornos.
Okay, so maybe some stability there, or not?
Not really, no. The source material is pretty clear that both grandparents were severe alcoholics, so you're basically swapping one kind of instability for another, setting the stage for abuse within the home itself.
Right. And Wuornos herself spoke about this later, didn't she?
She did. She detailed claims that her grandfather, Lori, sexually assaulted her and also subjected her to frequent, really brutal beatings. Often, she said, forcing her to strip naked before he beat her.
God, that's the person who's supposed to be protecting you.
Exactly. It's a catastrophic betrayal. And you can see how that exposure to violence, to sexual violation from her primary caregiver, would just have devastating developmental effects.
Right.
The lines between survival, harm, sex, they just get completely erased at a really fundamental level.
Yeah.
And the sources bear that out. By age 11, they note she was already engaging in sexual activity at school. Not for pleasure, but for basic things. Cigarettes, drugs, even food, survival.
Trading her body just to get by.
Pretty much. And there are also reports she engaged in sexual activity with her brother Keith around that time, too. It just speaks to the utter confusion and boundarylessness.
So that whole internal wiring gets completely scrambled, right? Intimacy becomes transactional. It's tied to violence. It's necessary just to survive.
Right.
And it escalates.
Very quickly. In 1970, she's just 14, and she gets pregnant.
Following a rape.
Yes. Later claimed by friends, biographers. It was supposedly an older local man known to be a pedophile, a friend of her grandfather's.
Jesus, so the trauma just keeps compounding.
Severely. She gives birth to a son, March 1971. But instead of any kind of support, what happens? Her grandfather forces her to give the baby up for adoption. Immediately.
Another abandonment. Forced abandonment, this time of her own child. dictated by her abuser.
It's a critical psychological breakpoint.
Yeah.
Victimization, then the loss of the only dependent connection she'd formed, all orchestrated by the person abusing her.
There's just no safety net anywhere.
None. Shortly after the birth, she drops out of school. Then her grandmother, Britta, dies liver failure, alcoholism, and then the final blow, her grandfather throws Aileen out of the house completely.
How old was she then?
15.
15 years old.
Kicked out.
A minor. No resources, forced onto the streets, basically, supporting herself entirely through prostitution. The sources say she was literally living in the woods nearby her old home. Living in the woods?
Yes.
I mean, it's the definition of a total systemic failure, isn't it? The family, the state.
Absolutely. By the time she should have been, worrying about high school, she's homeless, exploited, and trapped in the very same dynamics that had already caused her so much trauma.
Okay, so we see this raw foundation of trauma.
Yeah.
And it seems like it translates almost immediately into criminal behavior, self-destructive patterns, starting right around when she turns 18.
Yeah, the markers appear pretty quickly. Her first documented arrest, 1974, she's 18, it's in Colorado. Charges are DUI, disorderly conduct, and this detail really jumps out in hindsight.
Hold it.
Firing a .22 caliber pistol from a moving vehicle.
Wow. The same caliber as the murder weapon, 15 years early.
Exactly. It's this little a foreshadowy detail. It shows that propensity for explosive anger, for danger right from the start. And that was mixed with these really chaotic personal life choices too.
Like that marriage. That seems incredibly bizarre.
Oh, completely bizarre. 1976, she somehow hitchhikes down to Florida. And through circumstances that aren't totally clear, she marries Louis Gratzfell. He's 69 years old, a wealthy yacht club president.
69, she was what, 20?
20, yeah. The wedding announcement even made the local society pages. It's just this shocking collision of worlds. You can't even imagine it.
How long did that last? Not long, I'm guessing.
You guessed right. 9 months, just 9 weeks. It was annulled after Wuornos assaulted Fell with his own cane.
Hit him with his cane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that whole episode just screams instability, right? An inability to function in any kind of conventional setting, even one that offered security, wealth. The volatility was just immediate, overwhelming.
And you also see those traits starting to emerge that get diagnosed later. The antisocial, impulsive stuff.
Definitely. Like when her brother Keith died, esophageal cancer, July 1976, she received $10,000 from his life insurance.
Okay, that's a decent amount of money back then. Especially for someone with her background. A chance, maybe?
You'd think so, but what did the records show? She burned through the entire amount in, 2 months. Luxuries, impulse buys, including a brand new car.
Which she then wrecked.
Which she promptly wrecked, yeah.
Dude.
It's classic impulsivity, poor future planning, really strong indicators for antisocial personality disorder, immediate gratification over any kind of long-term thinking.
And the other side of the coin, the borderline diagnosis. So self-harm confirms that, right?
Absolutely. The sources list 6 suicide attempts between the ages of 14 and 22.
6 attempts.
Including a really serious one at 22 where she actually shot herself in the stomach and survived. Then the criminal record gets more serious in 1981. A felony. Armed robbery.
Armed robbery. What did she take?
This is almost absurd. $35 and 2 packs of cigarettes.
For an armed robbery, that suggests not exactly careful planning, more desperation or impulse.
Exactly. Pure impulse, maybe rage. She served time for that, got out in 1983. But all these little pieces, they just paint this picture of a life spiraling, totally lacking internal control, no external structure.
Which leads us, I guess, to the relationship that becomes central to everything. Tyria Moore.
Yes. This is pivotal. 1986. Wuornos is 30. She meets Tyria Moore, who's 24, working as a motel maid. They meet at a gay bar in Daytona Beach, the Zodiac.
And they clicked immediately.
Very quickly, moved in together. And Wuornos took on the role of provider, supporting them both through her prostitution income.
This is where it gets complicated, isn't it? This intense devotion to Moore versus the rage she felt towards her clients.
It's a stark dichotomy. Wuornos expressed this overwhelming love, this fierce devotion to Tyria. She said it at her trial, repeated it right up until her execution. Things like, "It was love beyond imaginable. Earthly words cannot describe how I felt about Tyria." Really intense stuff.
How do the experts explain that? How can someone with diagnosed ASPD, lacking empathy, and BPD with all its instability form such a powerful, almost obsessive bond?
Well, specialists suggest that for someone like Wuornos, whose entire life was defined by abandonment, who never had that secure maternal bond, Tyria might have represented this idealized, stable anchor, something she'd never had.
Like a lifeline.
Possibly. The attachment was likely fueled heavily by the borderline fear of abandonment. She'd do absolutely anything to keep Tyria, to maintain that connection.
Including continuing the high-risk work on the highways.
Exactly. She had to keep the money coming in to support them both, which meant more encounters with Johns, more risk. And ultimately, it's that pressure combined with everything else that leads to the first murder.
So that pressure cooker, needing the money for Tyria, decades of rage boiling underneath it, finally just explodes.
It seems that way. An explosion of violence, 7 men killed, all within that single 12-month period.
And the victims fit a pattern.
Very much so. All motorists, clients or potential clients, ages mostly between 40 and 65, and all killed with that same .22 pistol.
That consistency is unusual for female killers, isn't it? I remember reading that somewhere.
It's highly unusual. FBI profiler Robert Ressler, the guy who basically coined the term serial killer, he pointed this out. He said, female killers rarely engage in that kind of sequential killing, stranger on stranger, for gratification or gain. They usually kill people they know, maybe family, often over longer periods, poisoning. Wuornos was the exception.
She fit a more typically male pattern.
In many ways, yes, that predatory consistency. Ressler called her the sole exception he'd identified in his work up to that point.
Okay, let's talk about the first victim, because this one is crucial for understanding her defense, her narrative. Richard Charles Mallory.
Right. Mallory, 51 years old, owned an electronics store. Murdered November 30th, 1989. This is the case where Wuornos always consistently claimed self-defense.
What was her specific claim?
She maintained that he drove her out to an isolated spot, then violently beat her, raped her, sodomized her. She said she had to shoot him to save her own life. And the sources do suggest that first encounter was particularly brutal. That self-defense claim became the core of her story for years.
And there was something about Mallory's background that made this claim, well, not entirely unbelievable, right?
Exactly. This is what makes it so complex and what was fought over so hard in court. It came out that Mallory had a prior conviction for attempted rape in Maryland.
Attempted rape. When was this?
Back in the late 50s, early 60s, records showed he was committed to a facility between 1958 and 62 after charges of assault with intent to rape.
Okay.
And not just that, official psychiatric evaluations from that time described him as having strong sociopathic trends.
So her claim that he was violent and potentially dangerous wasn't just pulled out of thin air.
Not at all. The defense argued this history corroborated her account, that she had a legitimate reason to fear for her life. It seriously complicated the prosecution's narrative that she just killed him to rob him, like the later victims.
But this crucial evidence about Mallory, it wasn't allowed in her trial.
Ultimately, no. Despite its potential significance, the judge ruled it inadmissible, suppressed it. That decision was a huge blow to the defense and became a major point of contention later on.
A massive turning point in the legal case.
Absolutely. But after Mallory, the killings continued, and the pattern seemed to shift pretty quickly. It moved away from anything that looked like plausible self-defense towards something much more like, well, robbery and execution.
The sheer number of victims really establishes that pattern, I suppose.
It does. Let's quickly run through the others just to get a sense of the scope here.
Okay, who's next?
David Andrew Spears, 47, construction worker, found naked, shot 6 times. Then Charles Edmund Carskaddon, 40, a rodeo worker, also found naked, shot 9 times.
9 times. That's overkill.
Extreme overkill. And with Carskaddon, Wuornos was later seen driving his car. She pawned his gun. Clear indicators that robbery was now, front and center.
Then there was the victim whose body was never found.
Right. Peter Abraham Seams, 65, retired merchant seaman. His car became a key piece of evidence later because it was found abandoned after a crash. Both Wuornos and Tyria Moore were seen leaving it. And crucially, Wuornos' handprint was found inside on the door handle.
A direct physical link.
A very direct link. After Seams, there was Troy Eugene Burris, 50, sausage salesman, shot twice. Then Charles Richard Dick Humphreys, 56. He was a retired Air Force major, actually a former chief of police.
Wow, a former police chief.
Yeah. He was found fully clothed, unlike some others, but shot 7 times, head and torso. Again, that high number of shots suggests rage, maybe, or just making absolutely sure.
Eliminating the witness.
Could be. And the final confirmed victim, Walter Gino Antonio, 61. He was a trucker, also worked as a security guard, even a reserve police officer. Found nearly naked, shot 4 times.
So 7 men in 12 months, starting with Mallory, where there's this cloud of possible self-defense complicated by his own past.
Right.
And ending with victims who seem clearly targeted for robbery, executed often with extreme violence.
That's the trajectory the prosecution laid out and the pattern that ultimately convicted her. The investigation really gained traction because of that Seams car crash in July 1990. Remember, his body was never found, but the car was key.
Right, Wuornos and Moore were seen abandoning it.
Exactly. Witnesses, especially one woman named Rhonda Bailey, gave pretty good descriptions of the two women fleeing the scene. That put investigators on the right track.
But the descriptions alone weren't enough, were they? They needed something concrete.
They did. The real technical breakthrough came from tracking the victim's stolen property. Police started finding items in various pawn shops.
And she used her real ID.
Or she used aliases, but the critical mistake was her fingerprint. It was found on a pawn receipt for some item belonging to one of the victims, because she already had a criminal record in Florida from that earlier robbery.
They had her prints on file.
Bingo. Her print from the pawn shop matched the print found inside Seams's abandoned car. Suddenly, they had a positive ID. Aileen Wuornos.
That must have happened fast then, the arrest.
It did. January 9th, 1991. They picked her up at a place called The Last Resort. It was a biker bar. Technically, it was on an outstanding warrant for carrying a concealed weapon. She was using the name Lori Grody. But they knew who they had.
And immediately, the focus shifts to Tyria Moore.
Immediately. They locate Tyria the very next day, up in Pennsylvania where she'd gone.
And this is where that intense bond Wuornos felt gets turned against her, right?
Completely weaponized. The police offer Tyria a deal, full cooperation in exchange for immunity from prosecution.
And she took it.
She took it, which meant returning to Florida and under police direction, making these monitored phone calls to Aileen, who is now in custody.
Trying to get a confession.
Exactly. Tyria played on that loyalty, pleaded with Aileen, saying things like, I need you to clear my name, tell them what happened. And Wuornos, believing she was protecting Tyria, the person she loved, she confessed.
When was the confession?
January 16th, 1991, just a week after her arrest. But, and this is crucial in that initial confession, she stuck to the self-defense story. She claimed all the men had tried to rape her, that she had to kill them.
So the confession wasn't initially about robbery?
Not primarily, no. That shifted later. The legal process then kicked into high gear. Her trial for just the Mallory murder started in January 1992.
And the defense strategy was all in on self-defense.
It had to be. But the prosecution had a very powerful tool in Florida, something called the Williams Rule.
The Williams Rule. What does that allow?
It's pretty controversial sometimes. It basically allows the prosecution, in certain situations, to bring in evidence of a defendant's other crimes they aren't currently on trial for, to show a pattern, like a common scheme or identity, or to show that the current crime wasn't just an accident or a mistake.
So they could talk about the other 6 murders, even though she was only on trial for Mallory's.
Precisely. The prosecution successfully argued that her claim of self-defense with Mallory didn't hold water because the other 6 killings showed this clear, consistent pattern of robbery and execution. It painted Mallory's death as just the first step in that pattern.
That must have been incredibly damaging for the defense. They're trying to focus on Mallory's history, her fear.
And the prosecution is bringing in testimony about 5 other killings, many clearly involving robbery, suggesting this one must have been robbery too. It effectively neutralized the self-defense argument in the jury's eyes.
And that was on top of the judge already refusing to allow Mallory's prior rape conviction into evidence.
Exactly. The judge blocked that evidence, saying its potential prejudice against the victim outweighed its relevance. So the defense couldn't fully present Mallory as a credible threat, and the jury heard about all the other killings. It was a lethal combination for Wuornos' case.
So conviction was pretty much inevitable at that point.
It seemed that way. With Tyria Moore's testimony against her and the Williams Rule evidence, Wuornos was convicted of Mallory's murder, sentenced to death just 4 days after the conviction.
And the diagnoses came out then too.
Ah.
BPD and ASPD.
Yes. Defense psychiatrists formally diagnosed her with both borderline personality disorder and antisocial personality disorder. Clear evidence of profound mental illness, but it didn't change the outcome. The conviction stood.
After that first conviction, her whole story started to change, didn't it? Became much less consistent.
Completely unstable,
Ah.
which really reflects those diagnoses, the BPD volatility, the psychopathic manipulation, perhaps. She went on to plead no contest or guilty to 5 more murders. She famously said she wanted to get right with God.
But she also made that statement differentiating Mallory from the others.
Right, that really contradictory statement. She admitted, yes, Richard Mallory did violently rape her, that was self-defense. But then she said, these others did not. They only began to start to.
undercutting her own initial blanket self-defense claim for everyone except Mallory.
Exactly. And then, later still, she completely flipped again, recanted the self-defense claim entirely for all of them, saying the only reasons were robbery and eliminating witnesses. Cold-blooded killing.
Just pure confusion or calculation.
That's the million-dollar question, and what makes it even more fascinating is what the documentarian Nick Broomfield reported. He spent a lot of time with her.
Right, he made those 2 films.
Yeah. Broomfield said that off-camera, years later on death row, Wuornos told him that it was self-defense after all. For all of them, or at least Mallory. But she said that after 10 years waiting to be executed, she just couldn't take it anymore. She wanted to die.
So the later confessions, the cold-as-ice killer persona,
Yeah.
that might have been an act to speed up the execution.
It's possible. It suggests her recantations might have been a calculated strategy to appear competent, remorseless, and ready for execution. A final desperate attempt to exert some control over her own death by convincing the state to kill her faster. It's a chilling thought.
So Wuornos spends over a decade on death row. Broward Correctional Institution. Appeals denied, including by the Supreme Court in '96. And then in 2001, she makes this dramatic move.
Yeah, she petitions the court to dismiss her own lawyers, to terminate all her appeals. She basically starts volunteering for execution.
She was very vocal about it, right? Declaring her competence.
Extremely vocal. Her statements from that time are really chilling, but they were coherent enough for the courts. She said things like, "I killed those men, robbed them as cold as ice, and I'd do it again too. There's no chance in keeping me alive."
Like she was leaning into the monster image.
Absolutely. She added, "I'm so sick of hearing this she's crazy stuff." She was adamant she was sane, hated humanity, and wanted to die. And despite the clear underlying pathology, a court-appointed panel did ultimately find her mentally competent to waive her appeals.
But as the execution date got closer, her behavior became even more extreme. That paranoia.
Exponentially worse. In those final weeks and months, she started making these really specific, furious accusations against the prison guards, the matrons.
What kind of accusations?
Severe abuse. She claimed they were putting dirt, saliva, even urine in her food. She talked about them using sonic pressure, some kind of sound torture, to drive her insane or force her to kill herself before the state could execute her.
Is there any truth to it? Or was it delusion?
It's impossible to know for sure. Her attorney confirmed that she firmly believed it was happening. Whether it was actual abuse compounding her paranoia or purely a manifestation of a final psychotic break, we just don't know. But her rage and fear were palpable.
And that led to her final words on camera, captured by Broomfield.
Yes, just before being lit away, basically. "Thanks a lot, society, for railroading my ass. Total defiance and perceived betrayal."
Looking at it clinically, the psychological assessments were pretty damning, weren't they? The psychopathy score?
Extremely high.
Wow.
She was assessed using the Hare Psychopathy Checklist, the PCLR. Scored a 32 out of 40.
And the cutoff for clinical psychopathy is?
30. So 32 is well into psychopathic territory. That diagnosis, combined with the earlier BPD and antisocial personality disorder diagnoses, it confirms this personality structure just riddled with volatility, impulsivity, manipulation, and a profound lack of empathy.
And the experts, like Bryce Arrigo you mentioned, they really trace this directly back to the early trauma.
Consistently. They link these disorders directly back to everything we discussed in part 1. The childhood sexual abuse, the abandonment, the survival sex work, it all just fundamentally damaged her ability to form healthy attachments, to develop empathy. Even learning at age 11 that her grandparents weren't her biological parents, another layer of identity disruption. It all fed into these primitive dissociative ways of coping.
Which helps explain why her violence was so atypical for a female offender.
Exactly. As we said, female serial killers usually have known victims, use different methods, often over long periods, maybe for specific gain, like insurance money. Wuornos killed strangers, violently with a gun, quickly, in a way that looked more like male offenders seeking, well, whatever dark gratification they get. She broke the mold because her pathology was so severe and perhaps uniquely formed by that specific trauma history.
Which brings us to the end. The execution itself, October 9th, 2002, lethal injection.
That's right. She declined a traditional last meal, just asked for and got a cup of coffee.
And her final statement, it was as bizarre as everything else about her, wasn't it?
Completely baffling. Classic Wuornos, really. Cryptic, full of this strange, maybe psychotic imagery. She said, "Yes, I would just like to say I'm sailing with the rock and I'll be back, like Independence Day with Jesus. June 6th, like the movie. Big mothership and all. I'll be back. I'll be back."
Sailing with the Rock, Independence Day. It's just out there.
Completely. A final burst of chaos and defiance for the public record just encapsulated her whole life in a way.
Her ashes were scattered later.
Yeah, back in Michigan. Her childhood friend, Dawn Botkins, scattered them under a tree. But her image, her story, it hasn't faded away at all. There's this enduring, almost relentless cultural fascination.
We definitely saw that with the movie Monster. Charlize Theron won an Oscar for portraying her.
Huge impact. And Broomfield's 2 documentaries gave us that invaluable, direct window into her mindset, both before conviction and on death row. They're essential sources.
And she keeps popping up, right? References in books, TV shows. I know American Horror Story used her character Law and Order plots.
Music, too. That Natalie Merchant song, Carnival. Apparently, Wuornos played it constantly on death row. It was played at her funeral, used in Broomfield's film. It sort of became her unofficial theme song, connecting her life to popular culture in this really strange way. So, wrapping this up, this deep dive really highlights those 2 almost irreconcilable aspects of Aileen Wuornos, doesn't it?
Yeah. On one hand, you have the undeniable horror, the sequence of brutal murders, the violence is just stark.
Undeniable.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, you have this profound, lifelong history of psychological damage. Systemic failure from day one. Extreme trauma that clearly shaped her pathology.
And we've seen her constantly trying to control the narrative, haven't we? From the initial self-defense claim, which had some potential credibility with Mallory,
Right.
to then recanting it, maybe to seem tougher, maybe to hasten her own death, then maybe telling Broomfield it was self-defense after all. We're left with multiple versions of the truth, all filtered through just decades of untreated mental illness and trauma.
It leaves you without easy answers. The accountability for the murders themselves, legally, that's clear. She confessed, she was convicted. But the why, it's tangled up in this demonstrable psychopathology that seems undeniably rooted in that horrific, lifelong victimization.
So the final thought we want to leave you, the listener, with is this. The Wuornos case forces us right up against that really difficult question of agency versus circumstance. Where does an individual's responsibility for truly heinous actions end? And where does the failure of society, the failure to protect a child from such extreme, pervasive abuse, the failure to intervene, where does that responsibility begin?
It's a tough ethical line to draw, a psychological puzzle, and it's a question that, honestly, decades after her execution still hangs over her documented story. Still haunts us, really.